Hey, welcome to another rule review here at Little Wars TV. This week, Steve and I are going to be taking a look at Force on Force. This was written by Ambush Alley Games, published by the big boys, by Osprey, back in 2011. And this is a modern set of rules designed for platoon or lower level actions.
Before we get into the meat of the review though, let's just quickly review exactly how we run these things. We grade every rule set on 5 different categories. Now they are weighted slightly differently, so you don't just add them up to get the final score. So keep that in mind as we go through. So the first category is presentation. And as you can tell, if you look at this book, it's a beautiful looking hardcover volume. We're talking over 200 pages, fully indexed, full color throughout. Everything you would expect from an Osprey publication, particularly for 7 years ago when they were printing up these types of things. And when you read through it, the rules themselves are very understandable. As we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit though, there are a lot of those rules. So on presentation, I gave it a 9. And the only reason that I dinged it a little bit is because there are a fair number of typos spread throughout the rules, which as someone who edits written work product for a living really bugged me.
I'm agreeing on the score. Also a 9 out of 10 for me on presentation. This is beautiful enough to be like sit out on your coffee table.
Oh, absolutely.
It's one of the most attractive wargaming rulebooks that I have in my entire collection. All right, next category that we're going to talk about here is playability. For me, this is a little bit of a mixed bag on Force on Force. This was the lowest score that I gave it in any category, even though I love the rules. I'll start with a couple of the highlights, the good things about playability. Does not require a lot of miniatures. I mean, we've played games in this club where one player has like as few as 6 or 8 highly skilled operators, almost like a Delta Force, so you don't need a lot. But we've also played games where somebody might be running 30 irregulars, kind of, scrub guys. Table size also doesn't matter. There's no maximum range in this rule set. We're going to talk about mechanics in a minute. But because there's no maximum range, you could play this game on a 3x3 table, 4x4. We often play on 6x4. So again, this is all working in Force on Force's favor because it is easy to get into a game from that standpoint. As I shift into some of my criticisms on playability, I would say playtime in this game, speed of play, it's fairly average. I would not call Force on Force a fast play game by any means. You can do a small game in about 2 hours, but the game that you saw us play last week for Fallujah, which was, a reasonably sized 5-player game, that's a 4 to 5 hour endeavor.
I agree with that, and I suspect I know why you're going to explain that ends up taking us a fair amount of time. And it goes to something that, I do ding it for a little bit, though I think a little bit more than you do, and that's the amount of times you find yourself having to reference the rules. My
number one complaint about Force on Force. Every time we play this rule set, both of us, we have multiple copies of the rules, and everybody is flipping through this thing looking because there are so many rules, which is great because it allows you to do anything you want. You want to do bomb vests, you want to do IEDs, you want to do helicopter insertions. Everything is in this rule set, which is cool, but you're just constantly looking for stuff in here. And it slows down the game. It slows down the playability for me.
It does, although, I don't ding it as much as you do, I think, in the final analysis, because I also look at the way that we are as a club. And we honestly just don't play. As much as everyone loves this rule set, we have so many different armies and so many rule sets that we do love, it's rare for us to go a year playing more than maybe 2 Force on Force games. So if you go 6 months between every time you play a rule system,
you're going to forget something.
Right.
I'll wrap up my discussion of playability by saying that there was talk a couple years ago on Ambush Alley Games on their website, and they're the ones who wrote this, of a slimmed down version of Force on Force. I think they were going to call it Ambush Alley 2. I would be extremely interested in a slightly slimmed down version of this to enhance some of that playability.
I actually played a beta game of that version at a convention back when they were talking about that.
They never released it.
I never saw it released, which is unfortunate because I think a lot of the changes that they made were great. There's no other way to put it.
Well, before we move on to mechanics and talk about how this game actually works, I guess we should give our scores. Like I alluded, for me, this was the lowest ranked category. I gave it a 6 out of 10. Good playability, not great.
And I gave it a 9, another 9.
Well, Steve, if there are a lot of rules to remember in Force on Force, as we discussed, I think we'll probably both agree that if you can remember them, those rules are really innovative and fun. I love the mechanics that happen in Force on Force. To start off a game, this is basically an I go, you go system. One side gets to move its stuff, and then the other side gets to move its stuff. But there's a big twist in Force on Force in that you can be interrupted in moving your troops. So maybe you should talk about that. That's the core of the game.
And it's not just moving, it's firing. It's the reaction system. To try and capture the fluid nature of modern combat, and I've never been in modern combat, but I know people who have been, and some of them took part in our battle that you saw last week. They enjoy it for that purpose as well. That when you announce ahead of time whether you want to move or whether you want to fire or whether you want to do both, and as you announce that, then the Op 4 can then say, well, you know what, I want to react to that. And so what you think is, I'm going to take the initiative and do this and get into position and do exactly what I want. You could end up being reacted to by multiple other units, some of which you don't even know are there.
Yes.
And then, you know, there are other units that could react to that. And, you know, as far as the mechanic, it's very innovative. It creates a very exciting and tense atmosphere. My one caveat would be that does result in a little bit of chain reaction.
That can bog things down.
Which bogs things down. That's actually something they were trying to smooth out in Ambush Alley 2. But as long as you're not dealing with the tremendous number of forces, after you do it a couple of times, it does become very intuitive, and it leads to a very exciting game.
That reaction system, which is the core of the game, is also a great way to reflect differences in troop quality. The better quality your troops, of course, the more likely it is that they will react, and the more times they can take a reaction in a single turn, which is a really neat way to simulate that.
Absolutely, and the troop qualities in this game, they use a mechanic which maybe isn't as innovative as the reaction system, but it's still a mechanic that I think is really underused in the industry, and that I absolutely love. And that's troop quality dice.
Yeah.
So when you have an insurgent force that is very poorly trained, you might be rolling for successes, which anything 4 or higher is a success for pretty much anything that you're doing. They're only rolling D6s, but you get regular U.S. Army or Marines, they're D8s. You have operators, they may be D10s. And so
Delta Force could be D12,
yes,
which is the highest dice you can get in this game. And if you only need a 4 or better on a D12,
yeah,
you're good to go.
but what does that do? That takes out all of the adding up and subtracting of a ton of different modifiers, right. And I think that, you know, saves a lot of time that maybe you use flipping through the rule book looking for a rule, but when you're actually engaged in combat, it saves a lot of time. Now, there are some modifiers, but they're very easy to remember.
Very few. I don't know that we need to say that much more about the mechanics, because even though there's a lot going on in this game, the main highlights really are the troop quality dice and the reaction system. Very briefly, just to summarize some of the other basic elements of the game, I like the way movement's handled. It's very simple. There are 2 movement speeds, tactical and rapid. One of them means that you can move and fire, and the other means you're just running. So that's quite easy to remember. Cover, if more than half of your models are in a building or are in cover, everybody gets the cover. We've already mentioned that shooting requires a success of 4 or better. But that success of 4 or better carries over to pretty much every roll you need in this game. Do you need to test to jump out of a helicopter? Do you need to make a morale check? Everything in the game is you need a 4 or better. And I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know that, you know half the game.
Yeah, that's basically it. If I have one criticism I want to make at the very end here about the way that the mechanics do function, is that Force on Force can be a very granular game, especially when it comes to wounds. Models in this game, we go so far as to track. You have to roll when a guy gets hit. Is he lightly wounded? Is he seriously wounded? Or is he killed? And each one of those have different implications. If your guy is heavily wounded, other models have to drag him around the table. it leads to putting out a lot of chips or markers on the table because you're constantly trying to remember who's got a light wound, who's got a serious wound, and so that can be a little bit granular if you're running, let's just say, maybe you've got 30 guys out there. It's a lot to keep track of with 30 guys.
Yeah, but I do think that's actually important when you're modeling modern combat, particularly for regular forces. Like if you're doing something set in Fallujah in 2004, you know, the U.S. troops are very concerned about making sure that they, you know, get their injured or even the bodies of their fallen comrades out of there.
So what's your final analysis on the mechanics, your score?
Well, you know, as I was thinking about this, I have not given out any score this high before.
Oh boy!
Any other rule set so far.
Here we go.
I was thinking about this and one other rule set, you'll have to stick around until later this season to find out which one that one is. If I'm not going to give a 10 to this one, I don't know what I am, because
wow. A 10?
A 10
the Holy
on
Grail.
Mechanics, because it just does so many things that I like, and models what I think modern combat is like on the tabletop, or at least as close to it as you can get. Force on Force does that for me, so I'm going there. I'm giving it a 10.
Well, I have not yet given a 10, and I'm not going to on this category, but I will agree with your sentiment that this is a great set of rules, mechanically, especially at modeling asymmetrical warfare. There's a lot of rules in here to reflect that difference, dramatic difference in troop quality. So I'm giving it a good score, not out of 10, but I'm going 8 out of 10 on the mechanics. Very impressed.
So the next category, and it's not a huge one, but it's important considering we are historical wargamers. Does the game provide for historical flavor? And it's a little odd saying historical flavor when you're talking about a rule set that's trying to model modern combat, although modern combat for their supplements can actually go anywhere from the 1940s with their special operations classified stuff up through the 60s, 70s, you know, Bush Wars, Vietnam, and then obviously into the modern wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the War on Terror. But you know, as we've kind of alluded to in the last section, I think it does an excellent job of recreating modern warfare. And so if we're talking historical flavor and allowing you to recreate what things are like, whether you're in the deserts of Afghanistan or the jungles of Vietnam, it's there. You can do it. And so, you know, having broken the seal on the number 10, again, it's kind of, yeah, I'm going there. I'm going there. 2-in-1 review. I know I'm losing all credibility with you because you're
great
hard
inflation.
On everything.
Great inflation.
Oh no. You know, I'm going
10.
there. Yeah.
10. Wow. Okay, I'm not going 10. The reason I'm knocking it is because of what you just alluded to. I think that if we were just focusing on post 9/11 modern combat, then I probably would give this a 10. But as you start going farther and farther back in history, Vietnam, even, like you said, World War II, I think it's stretching the nature of the rule set a little bit. There are other rule sets that I would recommend that focus on those periods that I think might give you a little bit more period flavor than Force on Force if you want to do World War II or Vietnam. You can certainly use this rule set, and we have, for a good game, but it's a question of, are we sticking to the post 9/11 or are we starting to go back in history? So I'll split the difference and call it an 8 out of 10. I think it's very good. I would probably be a 10 out of 10 if we were just talking about 9/11 and after.
I think that's fair.
Final category that we're going to discuss in this rule review is support. And as we just discussed a minute ago, spread out on the table in front of us, you can see a cornucopia of supplements available for this rule set. There is a lot of support available for all these different scenario books. Of course, you have to pay for all of them. These aren't free scenarios. And that's going to be one of my criticisms of the support available for Force on Force. Ambush Alley has been quiet for the last several years. And actually, if you'd like to buy a copy today, the hardback of Force on Force, it's out of print. The cheapest one I found was on eBay, and it was going for almost $100 new. So I hope they fire things up again. I know that they're still active as a group, but as a publisher, things have been quite quiet.
Yeah, and I don't know when you, the viewer, are going to actually be watching this, but as we're filming the rule review...
Summer 2018, we're filming
this. Yes, I went to their website right before we filmed this, and there is an announcement on there about they were looking at printing some of this stuff up again. I hope that happens, because it really deserves to be out there.
Yes, absolutely. So the support at the moment, as of summer 2018, is not great. They do have all these items for sale, but you're not going to find a ton of free scenarios. You're going to find very little on their website at the moment. Hopefully that will change. So I'm going 6 out of 10 for now. Hopefully it bounces back.
And I think the reason you're doing that is because you like things handed to you on a silver platter, hardbound, full color. Look, I like a nice full color rule set as much as the next person, and the hard binding is nice, although as I've talked about before, I like to be able to flip it around.
Right.
Everything you see here, everything that we've talked about, is available via PDF. And I think the rule book is what, maybe $25? I think it was.
25.
Supplements are $15. I have no trouble recommending these products for that price point whatsoever. So the fact that, you know, everything is still available, albeit not in printed form, the fact that there is an active community of other players who can help with scenario ideas or rules interpretations, which honestly I don't think you need that many. They're written so well. It's hard for me to think of a way that someone could do much better from a support standpoint.
You're making me feel like a real asshole. I'm going to go 7 out of 10. I'm going to revise. 7 out of 10. On the fly, revision. On the fly.
I'd like you to be up closer to where I am at 9, and the only reason I ding it to 1 is because the hardcover stuff. And
7 tops.
Okay, fine. But I give it a 9. I know I'm going, sounding like I'm really soft on this game, but I really do love this system.
Well, I think that the wrap-up, the conclusion to this rule review is going to be a bit anticlimactic, because you probably know that Steve and I are both going to strongly recommend that you go out and that you buy a copy of Force on Force. It is my favorite set for modern gaming. Price we did already mention, but Steve, would you be willing to pay $25 for the PDF of this rule set?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't remember how much that the hardback used to cost, because we bought these quite some time ago.
$34.95.
I'd pay it. I'd pay 35 bucks for this.
I'd pay 50 bucks for this hardcover.
Well, unfortunately, because it's out of print, if you want to get this book today, the cheapest used copy I found was on Amazon for $65. That's pushing steepness. But hopefully that, as we said, this will come back in print soon, and you'll be able to pick up a copy at a normal price. But a strong recommendation from me. My final score on this was 73, but because I inflated it, one, for getting badgered by Steve, I'm up to a 74 out of 100.
Right. Well, I end up a fair amount higher than that. I mean, when you're giving out 9s and 10s, you've got to expect to get there. So my final score was, what actually surprised me as I went through the process, as high as it was, because I generally don't give out high scores, a 95.
Easy professor right here.
Well, no, but you know, as I thought about it afterwards, I came to face the fact that, you know, in so many different eras and genres, I'm constantly looking for new rules. I'm constantly looking for a rule set that does something better.
Rule set.
You know, because I'm bothered by the little things in the rule set that I'm using now. You know what? When it comes to modern combat, I don't feel like I need to go out there and hunt down other rule sets. I've found the rule set that I like for those 2 or max 3 times a year that we do a modern scenario.
Well, I think that Steve and I both would agree that you should go out and buy a copy of Force on Force. If you want to see how some of the other members of our club ranked Force on Force, did anyone dare to go as high as a 95 like Steve?
I doubt it. We're all a bunch of jerks.
Yeah, we're a bunch of jerks, that's right. So probably not. But if you want to find out where everybody else fell on Force, you can go to our website, littlewarstv.com, and we would certainly be happy to hear your thoughts on Force. I know a lot of people have played. It is a pretty popular and well-supported rule set. So leave us a comment on the YouTube video and let us know what your final score would be.
If you like these rule reviews, we do them every other week in between our main episode releases, so if you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button below.